to order. The Ojai Basin Groundwater Management Agency at 3 o'clock on May 25th. Call the roll.
Director Daddy?
Here.
Director Finch?
Yes.
Director Thielke?
Here.
Director Whitman?
Here.
Chair Hages?
Here. I stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next item are public comments. Is that right or not?
No, the next one says
Director announcements.
Yeah, it is. Director announcements. Peter.
I have nothing today.
Bob.
Nothing.
Andy.
Yeah, this is maybe just tangentially, but in case somebody thought it is germane to our business, we are in the city, and it actually goes into the county, but we've had an issue with, I think directly related to what Jordan's been telling us about artesian conditions, which are impacting leach lines, leach fields for septic tanks. And so there's been some high bacteria readings and runoff, and there are places where water's just basically coming up, out of the ground, flowing down streets. And so it's kind of an interesting issue in the sense that who takes care of that is a multi-agency question, and it is not very clear who exactly is responsible and what exactly the resources are, but we are in the city, currently it's with the, I'm going to get this agency name wrong, so I got to be a little careful here, but it's the Regional Water Quality Control Board that has the, primary responsibility, but they don't necessarily get involved very willingly in a small homeowner type of a situation because they spend a lot of their time dealing with the industrial effluent type of issues that they get in LA County. So anyways, we're going through that issue. I just, public should know on behalf of the city. James Vega, our city manager, is, trying to direct everything in the right direction. I think he's doing a good job so far. And Matt LaVere from the county is also aware of the problem. And county public health has been brought into the loop as well.
Okay, thank you. Jim.
Nothing to report.
And I have nothing to report. Okay, general manager comments.
I just wanted to give you guys an update of kind of what I've been spending the month doing. I don't know if you all saw the email that OBGMA was not selected for the Prop 2 implementation grant for the groundwater sustainability plan. So we'll probably have to come up with a strategy for prioritizing the projects that were in the GSP and how to fund them in some kind of a rate study of some kind. So that was disappointing news. I don't know, Trevor, if you want to add anything else to that?
Just that it was a very competitive grant. I think the state had about 180 million that they awarded and over 750 million in requests. So it is unfortunate that the agency wasn't awarded. funding through this, and just note that it was a highly competitive process.
So we'll have to regroup and see how we implement the GSP requirements over the next few years. Let's see, I've been working on figuring out a way to make the payments for quarterly statements easier for all the pumpers by having them do something similar that Casitas does, which is an auto draft. So they can just send a voided check and give us authorization to just debit the money out of their account instead of having to send a check every quarter. So I think that's gonna be pretty straightforward once we get all the banking stuff squared away. You have a question?
Is now appropriate to comment on that?
Sure.
Since I pay both agencies,
Mm-hmm.
the difference is you create the bill for the one, so it's very easy for you to just do the auto draft. In this one, the the pumper has to create it's a self-created invoice. So it's actually just as easy, I think, to probably write, since we do the calculation, and write the check. I don't know that, while the one completely makes it brainless, the harder part of this process is actually meter reading, do the multiplication, addition, write the checks easy.
Yeah, that's another thing that I'm gonna look into when I go to that conference in Sacramento in a couple weeks. And I don't know if QuickBooks is able to generate those statements, or have people create an account online to enter their info, and then something like that, just to make it so avoiding going to the bank, depositing all these checks, and making it a little more user-friendly, I guess, for all the pumpers. I know it's not a huge exercise because it's only quarterly and there aren't that many, but I just saw a stack of papers in the office that still need to be processed and gone through, and it's a very labor-intensive, even if it's only quarterly. So if I can do it in a cost-effective way, I'm just looking into it. Let's see, I also looked into, and I think I asked for Peter's help a little bit on this, on the Form 700s that most officials are required to file, and I didn't really see a record of those from last year for this board. So do you guys recall ever having to fill them out?
A year ago, but I don't remember this year.
Oh, well, I'll give you some copies of them then, and you can take time to fill them out.
The agents, I always get the reminders directly from whatever
From the email?
county.
Or from the county, they can send them to you directly. So I talked with someone at the county clerk's office, because I looked on their website, and this agency wasn't even listed as an agency that it was required, and I was really confused about that. So she's doing some research on her end. She needs some stuff from us, like what do our bylaws say? So I'm still trying to wrap my head around a lot of things right now, and that's one of the things that's on my list.
We've always done it. We didn't do it this April,
Okay.
but my understanding is we weren't required to file them with the county. We were required to keep them on file here.
Okay, that could very well be the case.
See, mine are all done on that online thing.
For here, though, I do it online for Casitas, but I haven't done it here.
I thought, since Ojai Water Conservation and OBGMA, they'll both start with Ojai, and then I stop.
Right.
It'd be easier if we could do it that way.
I
Yeah.
honestly can't say.
Okay. Well, I'll keep looking into it and keep you posted. I'm just kind of a stickler for meeting regulatory requirements, so I'm trying to catch up on all of those things.
It would be easiest if you could send us a copy of what
Okay.
we last filled out. That's what I have the city do.
Okay. All right. I'll try to do some digging and see if I can find those. I got an email from the Ventura River Watershed Committee, their leadership committee. I don't know if everybody else was copied on that or not, about adding an additional seat to include a tribal government representative. Does that ring a bell to anybody? They wanted us to chime in on it. The vote that they wanted to have by the end of May was to agree agree or disagree to include a tribal government seat in their charter, and agree or disagree to waive the fees for a tribal representative, and offer, I think it was a $500 stipend to that, to the tribe for their participation, and that fee would not affect what other members pay.
Are any of you familiar with what this organization?
I'm totally confused.
This is the Ventura River Watershed Committee.
Council?
It says Leadership Committee.
Leadership Committee of the
Leadership
Watershed
Committee,
Council.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, I can forward the email to everybody and then you can chime in. They just wanted a vote
Right, I don't know
I
who
don't
they
see
are.
where,
on having a tribal representative. So
I don't have a
from the
problem with that.
tribe.
I
For
just,
OBGMA?
Yeah.
For the Ventura River
For
Watershed Council.
getting a tribal representative from the Chumash tribe to serve on the Ventura River Watershed Council Leadership Committee.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
I don't think we know what the organization is about, nor familiar with whether we pay dues to it or.
We,
I think we've-
you participate in the Ventura River Watershed Council, right? No?
Not that I know of.
No.
I don't know why we were included in
we-
the email.
It's the offspring of the
No,
Ventura River Watershed
Committee.
and the Ventura River, so it's Watershed Councils of Ventura County, VCVC, that originally went for the Prop 50
Right.
funds almost 20 years ago. And a lot of that, Prop 1 and all of that, that then had the local offspring of the Ventura River Watershed Council
Yes.
that has reported and
this is
held
the,
meetings, kind of gotten somewhat diluted and a little weaker, I think, over the years.
I think the right thing to do is to refer that request to general counsel, for general counsel to give us
Okay.
some advice about, what's going on here and what we should be considering, because to me, I think it's primarily probably a legal issue. I don't know for sure. And I wouldn't want to make a decision one way or the other unless I had some advice on
Okay.
that.
it just
And-
showed up on the screen.
And with that, what I would like to see is how they're chartered, what authority they have, what encompassment, and what our relationship to them is, if any.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I need to start at the start, and
Okay.
it looks like we're starting at the end, and I hate doing
Okay.
that.
No, I like I said, I wasn't sure how much you guys participated in that.
I think there
all?
might be, I mean, it goes way back to the days of meeting when we met over at Wild Tennis Academy, that maybe $500 or something like that was given. I mean, I think that, to the historical point, when was the last time we donated or
Okay.
gave anything, which hopefully QuickBooks would be able to tell you quick. Because I don't think it's been since we've moved to these,
I've been here.
I don't think it's been since we've moved to these meeting chambers.
Typically don't have any money to give away, so
Well, and it's not our money,
We don't
it's
belong to
our
any.
participants' money.
I don't know we belong.
We don't have any
Does
money.
the city belong to this?
Not that I know of, but like,
Yeah.
like you guys, we could. I don't know.
Okay.
This is the first I've heard of it, actually.
Okay. Okay.
We're not members in good standing, I don't
It
think.
doesn't sound like it.
Well, I am.
Were you paying dues, but you never go to the meetings?
Yeah, I don't think so.
The gym membership. Okay. Okay, I'll do a little more research into that.
If
I
the
have
board,
been-
I'm happy
Go
to, sorry to
ahead.
interrupt, Chair Pages and board members, I'm happy to take a look at the email and try to understand what's going on, and we can come back next meeting and provide some better information and direction, hopefully.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking for a response by May 31st. If we're silent on it, it probably wouldn't hurt anything. So, okay.
What day is today? Is today 27th?
25th?
5th.
25th.
Wow, got less than a week. We hurry up and need a response you don't know about. That's, I'm not comfortable with being rushed.
No, we'll just do it next month.
Okay. What else? So I've gone to the office and I've looked through a bunch of piles of papers and things that I didn't know if any action was taken on them. One was a well permit application for Reeves Orchard. That was from October of 2022. Does that ring a bell? Reeves Road?
I don't think we've permitted, I don't think we've green lighted.
Reeves Road.
Yeah, Reeves Orchard, LLC.
Who's the applicant?
Ojai Orchards.
Oh, I haven't heard
Does
of that.
not ring a bell.
It says it's a replacement well. I'll reach out to them and see if they still need to replace their well or not, and then we can go from there. I think, one more thing. I saw a letter in there that the 2022 government compensation report was due April 30th for the employees. So that would have covered Roberta's payroll for all of last year. So I'm gonna have to ask the bookkeeper to put that report together. I believe was the only employee.
Yes.
So I'll get that done. We're late, obviously. And then I've just been going through emails and stuff, and I have a list of things. Anything for me? And Rebecca is doing the serving as a clerk today. She's on loan from Casitas for today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it?
That's all I have.
Okay, Jordan Basin report.
Mossy.
Yes, it is the mossy month of May. Obviously a play on Mary Mary, but all of a sudden we're seeing, going from a really cold, really wet early spring to much drier and a little bit warmer conditions, although it's still pretty chilly out there. Titled today's talk, the mossy month of May. Of course, the year-to-date rainfall totals are not much changed through the dry April and a little bit of rain that we got in May. We're at 41.01 inches on the valley floor and over 71 on the ridgetop. That's 198.3% of average. Still recognizing that driest April on record. The way the basin responds to this is that surface water was continuous flow from late December through January, and then returned on February 24th and has kept going since in virtually all the creeks, although we are noting now that Reeves Creek is discontinuous across the basin. At least Reeves Creek is infiltrating completely. The others are continuing to go along. The basin was likely full with a peak on April 13th, and that may be the historic high. And we're at that carrying capacity of top of the S-curve and seeing some oscillation in water levels and responses, both on a diurnal state and a little bit longer time frame. We'll talk about that. So in the Keywell area, we saw this humpback peak in April 2023. I like this curve because it was just this extra logger we put down to catch this peak and make sure we didn't miss it with the deeper logger that's set, just given the limitations of the equipment. But it's a nice gradual rise and then more of a gradual fall. This is a well that had the water levels below ground surface the entire time, as opposed to the Lago Marcino well. This is a bit further up in the basin, actually further to the west as well, and it's one that experienced some artesian pressure, and this logger that was in there since March has caught the intense rise of water levels and then the more slow decline in a well that flowed artesian. So what is artesian line? That's about ground surface in this particular well. The y-axis is such that we had close to 10 feet of pressure over the ground surface. That would have, if the pipe gone up 10 feet higher, it'd be full of water in this well, but instead it was flowing out onto ground surface and out toward the creeks. through the confining layers. What we notice is that there's a certain inflection point that we see when the artesian barrier is broken, if you will, sort of like a sonic boom of hydrogeology, where it sort of hits this pressure point and starts to go horizontal there to the right, if you can see that, and then springs up as it's freed in the artesian pressure. So this well had, it was capped, but was leaking out underneath the slab and some of the other equipment near the wellhead. We've heard about some, among the problems, as Director Whitman mentioned, of these artesian conditions. We've seen some wells have the electrical conduits for power cables and panel boxes be the only way water can escape, and you get electrical problems when that occurs and finds an incomplete splice or chewed wire or what have you. But it's interesting the way that this particular well, we were able to record its artesian pressure, some places where it was clearly released and maybe even pumped in the middle there. But then once it returned to subterranean conditions and was no longer flowing artesian, it was a much more gradual re-entry into that sonic boom. And that's what was happening in earliest May in this particular well. Now, as we say here today, the depth to water is about 5 feet. Now, in the bigger picture, in the main part of the basin,
Jordan, can you go back to that for just a second?
yeah,
You got an anomaly. In the center,
yes,
we have the jagged red line above the blue
correct.
line. What is that event?
So the blue line is the water, and the red line is temperature. And this is sort of the convention that we have. Now, while the blue line y-axis scale goes from 155 to 185 feet, it's a 30-foot delta, top to bottom, on the y-axis for the blue line. That's in feet of pressure above the logger. The red line is in temperature in degrees Fahrenheit and is a much tighter scale, going from 64.2 to 64.8 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's really exaggerated. So when we see the well turn on in this case, if we go left to right, the temperature as the water levels are rising gets warmer a little bit and then goes down once it starts getting the artesian pressure. So it starts becoming horizontal during the artesian time. But when the well is turned on, the water's probably coming up from cooler aquifers that are deeper, and the temperature drops, while infinitesimally small, it still drops. And then the pump turns off, and that's what's happening about the 16th of April.
Water temperature,
It's water temperature.
not
Yeah.
air temperature.
And it's water temperature at 175 feet where this is set. So it's bypassing the pump from above and below. So then jumps up above the blue line. They're totally different scales. This just happens to be the way it easily and rawly comes out of.
And why do you even put temperature on this?
Well, that's an interesting point, and one of the key components of any surface water and groundwater interaction evaluation is how the water level and the temperature will fluctuate. In surface water, we tend to see much more diurnal changes affected. In deeper percolating groundwater, we tend to see the longer term stability, whereas in waters that are more directly connected to surface water, you tend to see a more diurnal shift in that water temperature. And all the loggers that we use have temperature and water levels recording on them. So we can remove these for simplicity. We can change the scale and make it look like a straight line, but it's there, it's in red, and it begs the question.
And I won't ask again.
You're welcome to. You're welcome to. Yeah. In the bigger picture, longer term, higher scale here, of 0 to 350 feet below ground surface on the y-axis here, and 1944 to 2024 on the x-axis. But the take-home message is that we hit our peak around April 12th of this year with a depth to water of 37.78 feet, calling that it could be 100% capacity, it could be 99.9. Today, or at least yesterday, we were at 46.17 feet below ground surface at this well, and we're calling that about 90, just under 99% capacity, 79, 120 acre feet. Of course, that's up from the 195, almost 196-foot depth to water we had in November. So that's a great amount of rise in a very short amount of time, and roughly 10 years of capacity at our normal pumping rate. In the perch system, some of the water level information that you see here, and again, the x-axis is from last August, and then it's all of the, not last August, 2 Augusts ago. So you have the previous 2021 to 2022 water year as the peak there on the left, and then the summertime recession, and then the storms of 2022 to 2023, showing the rise in water levels on to the right. The x-axis here, as I mentioned, but the y-axis is about 25 feet in depth to water or water column represented by the blue line. In the on the temperature side, that's the red line that's near the bottom and shows the more gradual shifts. That's actually goes from about 69 to 81 degrees Fahrenheit. Those warm days that we pulled the logger in last early spring to late winter saw some sunshine, and it skewed that curve because it's sort of automated. But the key is that you see this pretty high delta between the summertime lows from, or even as late as November 2022 up until today, but yet still the recession that's heading toward that, toward the right as the curve goes down. The key there is that this is directly contributing to San Antonio Creek, and that recession is feeding San Antonio Creek with perch system water. A bit more on that later. So here we go. One of the things we have been able to measure March 6th, inflow at the various creek inflow points. We had the net recharge of about 84 CFS, a snapshot of 84 CFS flowing into the basin. Only 17 flowing out on San Antonio Creek proper, and 8 CFS coming out of Montgomery. It's quite a bit of water flowing out, but still the input was 104 CFS, and only that 20 going out, 24 going out, 25 going out. So our net was different. The 20th of April, right around the peak, 12 CFS coming out of Gridley, 14 CFS coming out of Senior Canyon. Thatcher had 12 CFS, Reeves had 5, and probably some out of the creeks to the west over the city. The surface flow out of the city, urbanized area, was 4 CFS and 51 CFS. When the basin's full at about this time, the net recharge is about nothing. The inflow is equal to the outflow. The sponge is full. So as water levels have gone down and conditions are getting a little bit drier, what's your prediction that we see for the mossy month of May? All right, so let's move ahead to what we see yesterday. May 24th, we do the same reconnaissance. 5 CFS out of Gridley, about 5 CFS out of Senior, about 4 CFS out of Thatcher, 3 CFS out of Reeves. Surface flow out of Montgomery Creek was 2 CFS, and the surface flow out at San Antonio Creek was 30 CFS. Wow. More water's leaving the basin than coming in as surface water. But remember that perched curve. Remember all the artesian wells we're getting. And I think that has something to do with this. So if our net recharge instantaneously is 15 CFS, we're losing 15 CFS from the basin. We're looking at about 30 plus or minus artesian wells that are each flowing around 50 gallons per minute each on average. That accounts for about 3 CFS. And the hypothesis is that much of the rest is coming from the 12 CFS that is the perched system's contribution. That's the water that's in storage in that shallowest, southwestern, uppermost saturated zone. And as those water levels recede, as we showed in that graph going down to the right, that water's going somewhere. It's leaving the basin via that particular avenue, feeding Montgomery Creek and San Antonio Creek over the perched system.
Jordan,
Yes.
why is Stewart Canyon 0?
So I think it's a much smaller watershed. It's a little bit different geology also. It has more of the Sespe and just Colzedale and a little bit of cold water bedrock in the headwaters, whereas Senior Canyon and Gridley are much larger. They also go further to the north, and they tap into the Matilaha Formation and the Hunkal, both of which, well, they feed Senior Canyon's tunnel. They also have a lot greater storage capacity, and it's a lot larger and higher elevation
This
tributaries.
stream is flowing
Right.
at least above the debris basin.
Yes, barely.
I don't know.
At Stewart.
It's hard to get across.
Well, which creek are you talking about?
In Stewart Canyon up Foothill,
Okay, yeah, because that's not much flow there, though, right? I mean, can you give an estimate on what, because we didn't see any
4 or
the other
5 CFS.
All right. Well, we'll have to check that because that's what we were able to find yesterday. Looked dry entering the debris basin. area.
Well, yeah, probably there. It
Yeah.
goes underground early there. Yeah.
So that's part of that contribution, and that would account to that net recharge. So maybe we decrease that net recharge to 11 CFS if that 4 to 5 is correct. But yeah, we'll happily check that. And the key is that it's going somewhere. It's going underground. It's feeding that perched system, and that has a water flow which is exiting the basin via that perch system. Of course, now here comes the mossy part. We went pretty high up in toward above Gridley and tried to get a look at, hey, what's going on up there? Is there still a lot of moss up higher in the watershed? And the answer that we see is yes, it certainly seems to be. And of course, when we get that much algae, it tends to be associated with higher nitrogen or phosphorus concentrations. And while there are some agricultural operations and a little bit of septic up there as well, it's not a tremendous amount, to my understanding, and there may be some airfall component to some of the nitrogen that's finding its way into that system, all of which feeds it. You'll see as this changes as we go down into the watershed. San Antonio Creek at Ladera, again, the algae just on this side of the dry river crossing. Thatcher coming in near the basin entry. These are all photographs from yesterday, cascading into the basin. Here's Reeves Creek near the basin entry where we take the measurement. San Antonio Creek at Grand, looking up toward the headwaters. Tremendous amount of the moss or the algae there, and probably about the lowest flow that we see. This is just before the perched system crosses, or San Antonio Creek, we cross over into the perched system. Because when you go on the other side of it, it's much thicker, it's much wider. Looking downstream from Grand Avenue Bridge, there tends to be a bit more flow just in that particular area and continuing downstream into the south. Thatcher at Boardman Road, that's again pretty clean water, actually, probably the least of the algae that we see in this particular area. But then there's Artesian Well near Boardman and Ojai Avenue, again flowing probably more than 50 GPM or more than 1/10 of a CFS. You can see the algae that's growing there to the right on the ground in that water system. Again, potentially high nitrate in that water, we don't know. But here's some of those dry creeks up in that Stewart Canyon area and near Daly Park in the city. But as we get further down into the city, that is flowing as the perch system is contributing to that flow. At where most of that portion of the city exits at Montgomery, we get that just a little less than 2 CFS flowing out under the bridge at Creek Road. And of course, the outflow point along San Antonio Creek, that's where we get that close to 28, 30 CFS. That's what that looks like as we're measuring it yesterday. And of course, as we get down toward Ventura River, Old Creek Road, not a lot of change visually looking there. It's in that 20 to 30 CFS rate. You can see the county's radar gauge there on the left in the foreground. That's the pipe with the white end on it. And of course, when we get to the Ventura River, it seems like San Antonio Creek is but a drop in the bucket of the larger watershed at the confluence. Of course, we get to see some artesian pressure in the monitoring well itself at South Fulton Street, and that's an important point which we've been predicting. Interestingly, it arrived a lot later here and seems to be much more of a plateauing portion in this portion of the basin. While the main aquifer at the Elrod well, that water level seems to be declining as pumping is increased into the late spring. And what I mean by that is shown in this graph. And of course, this graph shows a lot, but I will point out now that orange curve at the bottom is the main aquifer in the depth discrete monitoring well at South Fulton Street. It's still rising. Now we're in May, but the water level in the main aquifer at the Elrod well is the blue diamonds there at the top. That's been declining since April. So we're still seeing rises in the main portion of the basin under the city, but in the central portion of the basin, water levels starting to decline. And water levels in the flow rate in San Antonio Creek's also declining. We've gone from about 50 in April to 30 in May now. And of course, the water elevation, the CFS, and that's been continuous all the way across the basin. There hasn't been a daylighting of water since February. So going forward, what we'll be focusing on is continuing to do this monitoring in support of the agency and UDEC's work on reporting. We'd also like better estimates of the perch system aquifer, its extent and the gradients thereof, but also the storativity and transmissivity. How much water is actually in storage within that system? Because if it's contributing a 10 CFS to San Antonio Creek under these conditions, or that order of magnitude, then it's a very significant portion of the Ojai Basin that is probably the most easily managed with respect to habitat and surface water interaction. We should also be taking some water quality in wells, creeks, and some of these artesian wells, just because we have this opportunity now. The creeks won't be wet forever, and this is a good time to snapshot that, probably close to the beginning of summer. We also need to replace the logger in San Antonio Creek near the discharge side. We've had one of those loggers in place, but in the storms of probably January 9th, I'm gonna guess, 2023, it disappeared. We joke about how if they had a GPS tracker on the logger, you'd find it in the Santa Barbara Channel somewhere, but we just call it lost. And the data are still recording on there probably, but we just need to replace it for the purposes of monitoring that discharge. Questions?
Excuse me, what tests on the water quality?
So probably nitrate and some of the phosphorus type of components would be done. I think what we'd like to do is get a general mineral, sort of what you call the AGQ analysis. It's a laboratory in Oxnard that does some of the easiest, least expensive, the $46 water quality test. It's a quick and dirty way to get a good idea about the general mineral character, nitrate concentrations, boron, things of that nature. That's what we would do. Temperature, we're logging with the loggers that we have, and some of the field parameters, TDS and EC as well, when we collect those samples.
And then will you mark those on the map?
Absolutely.
So we can see what the levels are in adjacent to those wells that you test?
To the extent we can get to them, yeah.
Okay.
Jordan, I would think that there's water quality samples being taken and tested, whether it's for VCALG, the Ventura Irrigated Lands Program that has to do a dry and a wet monitoring. I mean, and I know I see Fish and Game out all the time, and Casitas with vials.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would hate to. Hopefully there's some way that we can coordinate with some of the other agencies or groups that are doing them.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And, we mentioned earlier the Ventura River Watershed Council. If everybody showed up to that meeting and said, hey, who's collecting water samples today or this month or this year, and we're able to get a coordinated effort to that extent, then we're in really good shape. No one else would have access to the depth discrete monitoring well.
Right.
The OBGMA does, and some of the creek monitoring that we do. But other than that, yes, I think it'd be great to coalesce the resources.
Well, I'm wondering if the LA Regional Board is coming out to do any testing because of the issue with the septic systems. They might be testing for nitrates in the creeks as well. For that.
Yeah, we'd hate to spend money reinventing wheels.
Yeah, and every farmer that has Primus certification, we do full water quality analysis on every well every year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, timing wise, but you might be able to say, hey, is anybody doing it this month, and get some,
Yeah, so it
because
begs
there's
the
a
question.
lot of info out there.
Yeah, how do we get the word out
Right.
to everyone
Right.
that might be doing those samples, and how do we
And the
collect
other one, I
challenge
get,
it?
the county sends me one on my Orange Road well, because they take a sample and run it through a full analysis. It's one well that they track for height or depth and quality.
Mhm.
Yeah, I forgot about that. So they do something also.
County's a place to start.
Yeah, I think we'll have to find out exactly who to ask and when
Yeah.
and how. So I think maybe one of us can start looking into that, Julia.
The one thing that's to note, I mean, I hike up Stewart Canyon a lot. There's moss up there too, and there's nothing. There's
Nothing
no
upstream.
development up there.
Right. Yeah, the eutrophication question is always in play, and oftentimes someone's looking at blaming it on a septic system or a sewer system or agricultural operation or some horse pasture, whatever it is. But when you see it that high up in watersheds, it begs the question of how much of it's coming from airfall nitrogen, how much of it might be coming from some of the marine sedimentary rocks that are in that headwater that certainly have phosphorus in them. Some of them have nitrogen compounds as well. And there's a lot of life up there that are sequestering nitrogen cycles. So it is present. Unfortunately, that algae grows and it does impede recharge. It impedes the infiltration of creek water into the aquifers. And that's one of the things that we want to pay attention to as well.
Okay, any further questions? All right, thank you, Jordan.
Of course.
I'll open up for public comments. This is a time for the public to comment on any items not on today's agenda. See any, Rebecca?
It appears Devin might have his hand raised.
Devin, do you have a comment?
Okay.
Well, if you do, we can get back to you. Can get back to you later if you're having technical difficulties. All right, the next item is a consent agenda, the financial report for April 2023. Anyone have any questions? If not, have a motion?
A motion to accept the report as submitted.
Second.
Call a roll.
Director Daddy?
Aye.
Director Finch?
Yes.
Director Thielke?
Yes.
Director Whitman?
Yes.
Chair Hages?
Yes. Okay, the next item is the action items. Action item A is a well application for 1205 Country Club Drive. Julia.
This one was presented last time as a discussion item. Thank you. It's an application with use less than 2 acre-feet a year, just for domestic irrigation. So I believe it meets all the requirements to be exempt from that executive order. And I don't see any reason not to verify this well.
Any questions?
You need a motion?
Yes.
I'd so move to approve it.
Second?
Call the roll.
Director Daddy?
Aye.
Director Finch?
Yes.
Director Thielke?
Yes.
Director Whitman?
Yes.
Chair Hages?
Yes. Next item is 8B. That's a well application for 4274 Thatcher Road.
This one was also a discussion item last time, and if you recall, there was an analysis by Kier Groundwater about the impact 4 acre-feet per year. And that's attached. Again, I believe it meets the requirements of the executive order. Well, they went through the analysis to show that it wouldn't affect the groundwater sustainability of the basins. So again, it's recommended for approval.
Questions or comments? Have a motion?
I so move.
I second.
Call the roll.
Director Downey?
Yes.
Director Finch?
Yes.
Director Filkey?
Yes.
Director Whitman?
Yes.
Chair Hages?
Yes. Okay, item 8C is seasonal groundwater level monitoring report.
So this is a requirement by the state to submit spring and fall data for the groundwater level. I asked Trevor to put together a proposal to do this work for us, and that proposal is attached. Their fee was $2,450, and I'd just like to add a little 10% contingency so I don't have to come back and ask for it again, just in case they run into any issues with compiling data or anything like that, just to make sure that we can get it submitted by the July 1st deadline. And they'll be coordinating that with Jordan and other people who collect that data.
Questions or comments?
I'd move.
Second.
Call the roll.
Director Downey?
Yes.
Director Finch?
Yes.
Director Filkey?
Yes.
Director Whitman?
Yes.
Chair Hages?
Yes. Okay, the next item is a resolution for signature authority in our banking accounts.
This one was just to clean up everything with the Bank of the Sierra so that the current board members and myself are added, and then other staff who are no longer at the agency are not on the banking account.
No questions or comments? We have a motion.
I move that we authorize.
I second.
Call the roll.
Director Downey?
Yes.
Director Finch?
Yes.
Director Filkey?
Yes.
Director Whitman?
Yes.
Chair Hages?
Yes.
Thank you for doing that. The second part of this that you all need to do is to go over to the bank and fill out signature cards. and all that. So there's a little bit of legwork on your part once I get this resolution over to them.
We're already on it. Do we have to go?
She said you're gonna have to do it all over again.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is there a time delay, or can I go tomorrow?
No.
Well, I gotta get the signatures on the resolution, I gotta scan it, and then I'm gonna email it to her. I don't know if she's gonna want an original or not.
You'll email it to us when we should go over then?
Yeah, I'll copy
All right,
all of you
I
all on it,
appreciate
and then
it.
I'll make those arrangements.
It's at the bank right over here by,
Yeah. Next to the
El
park.
Chicanto.
no?
No, Bank of the Sierra,
Bank of the Sierra.
over by,
El Chicanto.
Rincon Street,
Oh, okay.
right where all the construction is.
Cliff Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, where all the construction is.
Where you either can't get
You're
in or
welcome.
can't get out. Who's that caused by? Oh, wait.
Thank you for the speed bumps
You're so welcome. Drive
and
slowly.
traffic calming.
Traffic.
Patient sign. Very good.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next
better
item
than
is discussion of the general manager's work plan.
Yeah, so I've been wrapping my head around all the things that you all do and trying to, I guess, prioritize and come up with kind of what my priorities should be for I realize I'm interim. I'm already, I guess 2 months into it now. So I have some goals that I wanted to accomplish over the summer based on just what I saw was going on and what the needs were. And I just wanted to get your feedback on it and see if I'm on the right track or if you had things you don't think are as high a priority, or if you want to add anything. It's already going to be a busy summer, so I'm not encouraging that. But again, see if you guys had a chance to take a look at that, if anything popped into your head. Well, I already accomplished the first one, was the resolution for the banking authority. I guess I beat my goal already. So I'm going to take that off my list. So I guess there's room to add one more thing, if you want to add one more thing.
Just one. Having reviewed our insurance policy, it appears that we need to take a look at a couple of things. And I guess what I would ask is, and I'm not sure who's going to be tasked with this, our consultant's agreement. And before we go too far, there's a relationship between the interaction between OBGMA and the consultants and the insurance policy, which eliminates a number of coverages. And so I don't want us to go hog wild on one if we can repair it and fix it with a small tweak on the other.
Okay.
And then I would like to make sure that we take a look at the insurance policy again and figure out what we want. It seems to be void of a couple of things that all agencies have standard. And so I'll to send you and the chair an email
Okay.
as to what those are. And it just got renewed, a month ago or a month and a half. And that's fine. That's not an issue, but we do need to stick some fingers in the dike. Okay.
Well, I'd like to appoint Director Daddy to work with Julia on this.
That makes sense. Okay. Some of the other things were on there, like the, kind of, I guess I'd call them regulatory related, the state controller's annual report. I did get an email from them asking where it was, and I told them I'm working on it. There's also the audits. I got an email from the county actually just yesterday asking what was up with the audits, because the last one they have is from 2017. So I think I mentioned this the last time, that we do have someone working on the audit for 18-19. She sent me a bullet list of things that she's missing that she needs in order to complete those. So I'm working on getting that list of things together for her. Some of them are meeting minutes. I have someone working on that. I want to get caught up on all these things so that it's a little more smooth sailing and there's a time frame. So I know when all the deadlines are, and I work backwards from there to get them done in time. I mentioned the DWR reporting that we're going to have DUDEC do. Let's see what else. Cost of service. There's some financial things I want to get done. The budget for next year, a 5-year plan. Again, we need to implement the GSP now. We're going to have to figure out how to fund that. So that might, I don't know, just throwing it out there, I might take a separate workshop on how we do that, unless you want to do it at one of these meetings and we go a little longer to discuss that. What else? The municipal service report. Again, LAFCO is waiting for some things in order for them to finalize that report as well. So I just basically want to get caught up on some things that maybe have fallen through the cracks. That's how I'll spend my summer.
Any other questions or comments?
I think thank you.
Yeah, it's probably enough. If we can get that done, we'll be very happy.
It is enough. Yeah. All
Right. Thank you, Julia. The next item is the well verification process. Julia and Peter Candy have worked on this. We've got a lot accomplished in a very short time, so if you want to go over what you're proposing.
Sure. I thought the flow chart actually would be a helpful thing to go by, because I like processes. That's how my brain works. I know, like, if there's a yes, no, I go down this path or that path. And the executive order, Peter and I have had several, conversations about this to make sure that we're doing what's required and not kind of overstepping what the agency's authority is. So one of the things that stuck out to me was the application. When someone goes to the county, they kick it back to OBGMA, and we had this, what we call a well permit application. We're not the actual permitting agency, so the terminology was a little troublesome to me. And I think Peter probably agrees with that as well. So we came up with well verification instead. That kind of mimics what the executive order requires of us. And it kind of goes back to that paragraph 4A of Executive Order N323, which is attached as well. The responsibility of the Groundwater Sustainability Agency is to verify that the proposed well is not inconsistent with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Plan and doesn't decrease the likelihood of achieving a sustainability goal. And then the county's responsibility is paragraph 4B, issuing the actual permit for the well. Now, of course, as the GSA, we also require, a meter, and require them to report and all of that stuff. That's not gonna go away. It's just that the application, which I included a draft of my new application, has different terminology. It's a water well verification request, not a permit application. So I'm throwing it out there for feedback. I think there's also a process where the general manager can have some authority if a well is exempt. For example, I can just administratively approve it and then report back to you on a regular basis. If it's at some threshold, I put 10 acre-feet a year as just an example, where you'd want to see a well that is, a significant amount come to you before it gets signed off on. There's probably, a number there where you guys might feel comfortable. I can do things administratively, and then the board wants to see things above a certain level. What else, Peter? I feel like there's probably a couple more things.
Question on your revised thing.
Mm-hmm.
Alteration of existing well.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's come up or not yet. If somebody, I guess, for example, wants to increase the capacity, of their well, is that something that they would go to the county to get, or does that kind of slide under the radar?
Because it's only the casing size. The casing size, wells only go one way, and that's down after they're drilled.
Okay.
Brushing a well would increase the capacity of it, but brushing is,
Normal maintenance?
it's just normal maintenance.
Okay.
I'm kind of looking past you towards Jordan to,
I know.
there's nothing that I can think
I
of.
know
that-
the language is in the governor's order, I think
Is
that's
it?
where it
Okay.
came from.
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
assume going deeper would be
That would be an alteration for sure.
And I don't think you can go deeper on an existing well,
It's possible.
is it?
Or you could add perforations as well. That could be
That's
a
true.
modification.
Nature does that to me. Just rusts in.
Rust.
Julia, a couple of questions, and I really like your idea of changing the language because we don't issue the permit.
Peter's idea.
And Peter, thank you very much. When I look at the flow chart, there are some things in here that I'm a little hesitant on. I think, and maybe I'm wrong, that the majority of what we're going to see is going to be replacement wells. And in the order, it says permitted existing wells. Where are we asking for that proof? Where do we get that check mark? Where they bring in the permit, is that Ventura? Is that us? And I don't care if it's us, we need to do it. If it's not us, let's just ignore everything that's not us. And then I remember, Peter, we had a discussion a year ago, and it had to do with meters being effective and wearing out and what size and accuracy and all those other little boo-paw things. Is it something where we should be specifying certain meters for accuracy and so we get the proper collectability, and it makes sure that there's a value there where we don't over meter somebody that's using, a trickle and make them go nuts in expense. So if that's not for us to do, I just withdraw that whole statement. And if it's not up to us to verify on the application that it's a replacement for an existing permitted well, then I'll withdraw that too. But if it is, I think that should be somewhere in the application process.
Yeah, and under Part C for the type of well where it says replacement, they're supposed to fill in the existing well number.
I think that's what I was gonna say. It should be the existing registered well. I couldn't come up with the permit on any well other than the ones I've drilled in the last 12 to 15 years, and I don't think an old well needed any kind of permit way back when.
Prior to 1977.
Yeah, so, I mean, that means 90% of the wells out here were drilled, but they're been registered. So I think that's the key. It's a registered well that they've been paying on and reporting on.
And again, if that's not our responsibility to check that on the replacement, then like I say, I want to withdraw that discussion. I don't want to go fishing for more work that's not in our area and not required and not, something state water would come back 5 years and say, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that?
Yeah, and on the flow chart, I try to address that under the replacement well scenario where they can be exempt if it's a replacement well and the existing well was taken by eminent domain, then they're exempt. If they're not exempt, what I would do is when I have the well number, is I'd look through all their previous statements that they reported and see, well, what have they been reporting and using every year? And say they're using, 2 acre-feet a year and they're saying their replacement well is gonna be 10 acre-feet a year, I'll be like, this doesn't smell right. I need to, question that a little bit more, and then it's not a replacement well, then I would treat it as a new well. And, go kind of through this process.
And for the meters?
The meters, I think that probably will come into play with implementation of the GSP when we have to have a robust metering program and meter reading program, because now it's all self-reporting. And if we want to get to the point where we're taking the readings, or we have the little AMS radio reads on them, or we can download the data ourselves, that might be down the road a little bit. And I have to get up to speed. I might need Peter or Jordan to help me with that on what the Sigma requires for meeting. Maybe Trevor knows as well about the metering requirements.
For the time being, we have an existing metering ordinance which was updated, and that's what controls at this point in time. And all wells are required to be metered and periodically calibrated and checked.
I don't think anybody ever reports on their calibration.
Well, that's our fault.
So
We haven't followed up through with that. But they are all required to be metered,
yes,
no matter what size they are.
as far as standardizing the type
But-
and things, that's something we can look into.
I don't think the incentive nowadays is actually to the opposite. I think if somebody sees their meter not spinning, they get it fixed. Because with the fear of adjudication out there, you don't want to ever underreport. The only person I knew who shall not in this basin who misreported always reported 10 to 20% over and paid the extra happily with the fear of adjudication coming. Before meter in United, you now have to send a picture in once a year. And you only need to do it once a year. They're doing it quarterly, which, it's just like Edison misreading. Some month you get a way ridiculously low bill. Well, the next month they read it right and you get a double bill. So it only needs one picture a year, in my opinion. And you make everybody truthful.
On the verification process, it begs the question of what is the OBGMA jurisdiction and what is the delineation of the groundwater basin? For a long time, of course, we've had a permit process, albeit misnamed, that accounted for all the wells within the jurisdictional area of the OBGMA, such that the agency was aware of these wells when they were drilled and didn't have to wait on the county to deliver a well completion report or other information, so that the OBGMA knew that well existed. On the flow chart, and I think in the governor's order, it's flow chart assumes proposed well is located within DWR defined Ojai Basin. If outside DWR defined Ojai Basin, no well verification is required. I just want to make sure that that's not somehow misconstrued, that no OBGMA extraction facility is, within its jurisdictional boundaries, is not required to be registered.
Got
So
it.
we
Okay.
want to make sure that that's very clear, and that this is the same form that someone would use regardless of where within OBGMA jurisdiction they are, but that only so this would account for registration and verification.
Got it, okay.
Jordan, that's a good point. I think that's not necessarily made clear in the flow chart itself, but if you look at the well application and the changes to it, it was clearly intended to capture that, even though the form's called well verification application, it covers the registration of the wells, the metering of the wells, as well as, if the well is within the DWR boundaries of the basin, then you're going to need a well verification pursuant to the governor's executive order. So, hopefully that's clear. And if it's not clear, we can make it more clear, certainly.
Yeah.
So maybe, Jordan, if you want to take a closer look at the well application form, and with that thought in mind, and see if you think there should be any improvements there, open to any suggestions you have.
Yeah, I'll give it a little bit of thought.
Okay, I appreciate it.
It's probably one word in there somewhere.
So at City of Ojai, we have a director's exemption so that a project doesn't go through planning if it doesn't have to go to the planning commission if it meets certain criteria. And there's a form the planning director fills out to specify those things that take it out of that allows him to do his directors. So I think we could have a similar process that, some of the well applications certainly don't have to come to us for a hearing. And I think I heard you asking for that type
That
of
threshold is.
to bring that. Yeah. So what I would like to see is for you to propose those applications, maybe in consultation with Jordan and with Mr. Candy, of what would be appropriate types of applications being presented. And then I think just, for due process consideration, maybe they go to our consent calendar. So at least if somebody in the public, wants to say something about it, they're going to get notification.
Yeah, I had kind of set it up on the flow chart that way as maybe it could be either information or consent, I guess. And then just keeping like a running tab, which is the last page of, the ones that have been presented to the board, what the running total of, the proposed extractions are to date, and keep you informed,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, let me jump in if I could. Apologize for interrupting. But what's being proposed is essentially any well verifications request between 2 acre-feet and 10 acre-feet would go not to the board, but for director determination. General manager determination. And so those would be administratively approved. Now, that's up for the board to, weigh in on and indicate what they would prefer. But anything over 10 acre-feet per year would then go to the board for board hearing and a finding of approval or denial. So that's what's being proposed by the current flow chart. And it seems to me that, with regard to these administrative approvals that are between 2 and 10 acre-feet, I mean, if you get 50 of them, you got a lot of water that's being approved administratively to be extracted from the basin. And so there needs to be some review. If the board is comfortable with having, applications between 2 and 10 acre-feet being administratively approved, I think there needs to be sort of an aggregate limit placed on that, and that all needs to go to our consultants, Dudek and Kier, to determine, whether or not that aggregate amount is consistent with our groundwater sustainability plan and won't interfere with the implementation of the groundwater sustainability program. So I think that's what's, before you to decide what's sort of the threshold of amount that you think is appropriate for administrative approval, and then what's the total aggregate that might be appropriate for administrative approval, and then have that reviewed by consultants to provide us with a report, and then that would be the substantial evidence to support these administrative approvals. And I think it's a good point that these come on a consent agenda or somehow be, if somebody from the public wanted to object or raise some issues with a certain administrative approval that's being proposed, they'd have the opportunity to do so.
I think my comments were oriented primarily to 2 acre feet and under, which seemed to be just kind of a cursory consideration we're making, and that's easy. And I agree with Mr. Candy that when we're looking at between 2 and 10, that there's a lot more to consider. And so maybe there's a way to address all of the concerns that Mr. Candy referenced in an administrative report that, with a checklist. But I think ultimately, as Mr. Candy said, we have to decide whether it's sustainable when it's over 2 acre feet.
Well, okay, to tack on to both of yours discussion, I think what we need to do is we need to come up with a sustainable number. We've done that. And if we say for the heck of it, it's 5,000 acre feet, and then we say we don't want to exceed 2%, that's 100 acre feet. And then at that time where there's a cumulative 100 acre feet or 50 or 200, I don't really care what it is, as long as we have a number, then the general manager says, hey, we've reached a limit on this administrative issue, and we've allocated this much, and we need to go back to the basin and take a look historically and see where we are and see if we're going to give more. Does that make sense?
It does, but then you're dealing, then you have to address it again the next year. So the next year, then you make a new determination of what's sustainable after what's happened in the previous
If the basin is only 2/3 of what it was the prior year,
right?
then that cumulative number may go way down.
Yeah, I mean, you do that process at Casitas, right?
The problem is you have to look at some running average, 3 years, 5 years, because, like this year, there will be very few extractions because of the rain. So you're gonna have to look at a running average to see if we're creeping up into a point where it's not sustainable, and that's what we do at Casitas, and we use a longer term average than that, but we keep it monitored to see if we're beginning to go over. Jim?
I think I was going to say that during the discussion on the GSP, there was some 4 and 5 discussion, but really the 2 is the magic number, and we're not going to be overworked on this issue. The Sigma and GSP is where all of our work is going to be. I mean, if we really talk, the realistic number is 3 well applications a year. It's probably all we've ever seen. In some years it's 1 and 2. So I think I'd just do the 2 and let the rest, it won't cause our meetings to change much.
I agree with that.
And then we will have, other than the ones that are exempted by the governor's.
Small sample size for me, but in the 6 months I've been sitting here, we've only had 3 or 4 wells.
This is the busiest we've been the last 6 months.
Yeah.
You caused
it. It is. Yeah, well, there was a moratorium, so a lot of people were waiting, and there was a drought, and a lot of people were waiting. So I think we got a much more. I mean, I've been on here for 6 years or so, and this is the most I've ever seen too. So.
And since you've been here for 6 years and you've been into us forever, give me a relationship. 10 acre feet, is that really where it needs to go? 20? I mean, 20 acre feet is going to be not an enormous amount. I mean, the limit, the upper size of the well application.
No, I said 2,
You said,
Yeah.
okay, just 2,
just the 2.
not the
And then it
2
comes
to
up.
10.
We're not
Just 2.
limiting
And
it,
then-
we're just saying they have to come to
Yes.
the
Yeah,
board.
then between 2 and 10, they've got to come to us, and then we get that cumulative analysis and whether this is sustained, you know.
You know, I came here 4 years ago and had pulled a permit to drill a new well on Fordyce that was a full replacement well, and that was 100 acre feet type well, but I never drilled it. But it was just a replacement, so I mean, it would check that. Because, you know, it really goes, the funny part of this is, it's not the well, it's the plantings that demand the water. It's not the well. So anyway. But that would have said no, and so it would have gone down to just, it would have come here for, oh, maybe it wouldn't have, because it was replacement, I don't know, of historical same.
The county probably would have still kicked it back.
Yeah.
to
The
us.
governor's order kicks it back, even if it's a replacement.
Yeah.
But you see, on your
As far as a cumulative
Yeah.
impact, it would be,
0.
yeah.
See, that's the trouble with this proposed same or less than historical. It goes down to administrative on
And
this
it-
diagram.
And that can change. This is
Yeah.
just a draft.
Yeah,
So if it's a replacement well, it can still follow the same process for board action. If it's gonna be over 2 acres.
The flow chart is just proposed for discussion purposes to
Yeah.
get some input from board members, and we're getting good input. You know, what I'm hearing is 2 acre feet or less, that's administrative. Anything over that needs to go to the board, and it's not gonna be too troublesome on the board, and possibly replacement wells need to be looked at the board as well, and not be categorized as administrative approvals.
Yeah, I agree. It's less cumbersome for the staff. It's simple. It's 2 acre feet.
I like that.
Not that there needs to be another box, but I know the city of Ojai requires some approval for a well inside the city limits. Are you in the loop? In the loop of all
No,
of them?
I'm not
That
familiar
may be
with that.
something we might check.
Yeah, we have moratorium inside the city.
That was
Paul
the
Blatz
same
was
as the
mayor last
county?
time. Paul Blatz is the mayor last time we issued a permit, and that was up on Daly, Montgomery area.
I assumed that that this body was handling City of Ojai well applications.
Well, we did until there was, I don't know, there was some controversy. When was that? Big rush to drill wells in town or something.
That well was drilled when Paul Blatz
You know,
was
it was
mayor.
when was that?
And so that would
Right
have
when
been
Golden
6
State,
years.
and people were worried that they were gonna get to 1,000.
Right, right. No, that's true. I think it's when Golden State's rates were going up. There was a big rush to drill domestic wells. But I knew the city you're right, the city had a moratorium, but I don't know if that's still standing or not.
Yeah,
It is? Well, then there's
but
no.
we never get around to cleaning things up.
It's a pull-down menu.
Any other questions or comments on this item?
Yes, the other piece was if they're required to do, hire an outside consultant
Oh,
when
yeah.
they're over 2 acre feet a year or more. The process for that, you had the Cure groundwater report for the one that was already on the agenda. What I'd like to do, since DUDEC has the model, is somehow make sure that we keep the model updated, and when there's a new well added, we get the, completion from the county, that gets added to the model, so that it's always up to date. And we'd also need that exercise of having a third party confirm that it's meets the GSP, requirements, that it's not gonna be detrimental to the basin, it's not gonna prevent us from achieving the sustainability goal. So how do we wanna go through that process
So-
of a third-party verification?
So maybe the element that's missing here is, and I don't know, I don't think our model is that precise. Is there some number, this is to Trevor or Dudak, whoever, that, a plug number of 100 acre feet that's, or what is the margin of error in the model? It's probably plus or minus.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't
acre
fully
feet.
quantified the uncertainty, but really, I think the question here is what pumping rate can it sustain in the future before we hit minimum thresholds and undesirable results, right? We've run future scenario projections at, I believe it's about 4,000 acre feet per year. We saw over the next 50 years, the model does not project the occurrence of undesirable results, but we haven't pushed the model to say, what happens if we add 500 acre feet per year to that, 1,000 acre feet per year to that? Do we start to see the onset of minimum threshold exceedances that would constitute an undesirable result? So that exercise has not been done yet. It certainly can be done with the tool that we have. To your point, Director Finch, it's not, there is uncertainty associated with that, right? With that tool. So in that context, understanding that it is uncertain, it still could be useful to understand what additional pumping the basin might be able to sustain before hitting a minimum threshold or hitting conditions that would be considered undesirable.
Trevor, does it matter where that pumping occurs as well in the basin?
I'm
Variable?
sure it could, yes, but the way that the GSP is written in terms of an undesirable result occurring is it's not just a single well that needs to have a minimum threshold exceedance. It's a combination of wells for an extended period of time. So say, for example, you have a new well that's located directly adjacent to what we call a key well or a representative monitoring point. If that proposed operation of the new well causes the one well to drop below the MT, that doesn't mean that the basin's is experiencing undesirable results if the other wells in the network are not experiencing the same conditions. So there is flexibility in that regards to where a new well might be located and how we evaluate long-term sustainability in the basin.
So maybe it's on a case-by-case basis when someone submits an application, if we think it's gonna be significant enough that we would want, DUDEC to do some analysis, we can engage them at that point.
I almost think I was thinking about what Trevor was saying and then doing the math in my head. I think realistically, it's like 2.5%. If we did the math at just the basin going up 2.5%, which is 100 acre feet, and it's off the averages because this base, it's going to go up 10% easy in dry years and the fluctuations. But if you saw applications of 100 in total, we're so confined, and a lot of what's probably being pumped then offsets what might be being bought from Casitas. As I say, oftentimes it's not the well; it's a tit for tat. It's less in your pocket for 38 hours a week and whatever.
Yeah, and I think you were right. It's not the well, it's the planting. So we can approve a well for 100 acre feet. That doesn't mean it's going to pump 100 acre feet.
Or like
another-
it's already, the well's already doing
It's
it.
already doing that, or another well falls off. So I think, before we start putting restrictions on new wells, we're going to have some, logical basis for that. And at this point, we're not in overdraft. So, you know, how close we are to that, we're gonna have a little more data to, over longer term, to figure that out. But I think one of the other questions that Julia was getting at is there's two ways to go about this well verification for the sustainability process, and that is have the applicant basically deposit funds with us and we use our consultants to do the analysis, or we have the applicant has to go out and get their own consultant. And in that case, we want to make sure that there's no appearance of conflict of interest by using our consultants. So it's kind of a which way are we gonna go?
Director Hages, in that circumstance, I still think that we would have to have our consultant peer review whatever the third-party consultant did. I don't know that I'm certainly not, and I don't know that any of the board members are in a position to, take a report from a third-party consultant and determine whether it's truthful, accurate, that sort of thing. So it almost seems to me is somebody, an applicant goes out, hires a professional hydrogeologist to prepare a report. They submit the report. The report says that this is not going to interfere with the sustainability program of the agency, and we'd still have to have that peer reviewed by our consultant, whether that be Dudek or Jordan. And so I think there's going to be an expense there regardless. And that's the point I want to make, that maybe we should be thinking about collecting that fee up front, regardless of whether we're doing the work or they're doing the work, because I think we're going to have to do the work anyway to support a decision ultimately on the well verification.
Any comments on that? Well, we don't have to make a decision right now, but
Right.
give Julia a chance to draft up some policies on that.
And find out what we would need to charge for our consultants, what that cost is gonna be. I don't wanna say extra cost, but it is gonna be a cost.
Yep. I can talk with Trevor and Jordan about that.
Any other questions or comments on that item? Well, thank you, Julia and Peter. Made a lot of progress, I think. Okay. The next item, if there's no other questions or comments, is adjournment. We're adjourned. Thank you. And thank you, Julia, and thank you to Casitas for providing us with some assistance with Rebecca. Thank you.
Bye all. Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Is that off? Are we no longer live?
Hold on one second, I'm gonna close this out.
So yes, I need you